Hey, welcome everyone. This is the weirdest one. Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out today. We've had a really busy morning already. The executive committee met and we've covered a lot of great items that we'll either be talking about here today or via the newsletter. So I hope you guys are getting the newsletter. If you're not, please make certain that Vincent gets your email and that we try to sort that out. We'll start the meeting as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance and a quick invocation. And then we're going to turn it over to Randall Arms with Black Line Safety. He's here to share with us. And so we're excited about that. And at the conclusion of that, we'll have our lunch and then we'll continue with any new items that you all would like to discuss, maybe a few old items as well. So let's rise, if you will, and let's salute and let's pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, let's pray. I'll lead us. God, we just thank you for this day and for this opportunity to serve others. Use us and let your name be the glory. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Randall, you briefly introduce yourself and take it from there.
Yeah. So good mid-morning, almost afternoon, right? My name is Randall Arms. I work for a company called Black Line Safety. We are a company based in Calgary, Canada, that does lone worker and gas detection devices. We are a company that does manufacturing services, dispatching, kind of a whole shoot match when it comes to providing solutions for lone worker and gas detection. So a little bit about myself. I've kind of had an interesting career. So in safety, I've kind of touched on every aspect in safety, whether it be working for a distributor, working for a manufacturer representative, actually being an EHS professional for a short time here, and then now at the manufacturer level. So I've kind of seen every different aspect of safety and product and behavior, so on and so forth. So give me a second. Let me get my presentation set up. But what we're going to talk about today is lone worker. So if you guys can, whether you're virtual or in person here, what is lone worker? How would you guys describe lone worker?
When someone works alone.
That is a perfect answer right there. It's literally someone who would work alone without direct or supervision or close supervision. So think about in your industry, how often do you see that? Where do you see that? Is it something that's been in your forethought when you're looking at your recognized hazards? Is it something that, I know we always look at those states of safety that we're always harping on, right? Lockout, confined space, powered industrial truck, all those different things. But what about that person that works off shift? What about the person that works from a vehicle in the service industry, right? Those are the people that we often overlook and we take for granted for using, oh, he's got a cell phone, he'll be fine. Well, what about the situations where you can't reach a cell phone? What if it's a medical situation, right? What if he gets knocked unconscious? What if he falls, right? Those are the things that we want to talk about today, and how do we wrap that around into a management program? Okay. So what we passed out in front of you is a peer-reviewed article from Dr. Fred Straub. ASSP posted this article online back in January of 2021. And it was really about how do you set up a lone worker safety management system? What does it look like? This article was a really good 6-page, a lot of words, right? There's also some really good tables that we're going to kind of go over too. How do you incorporate that into your company? One second, let me throw this. I'm the host. I'm dangerous now. Fine. So let's see. So again, the why. The other thing is, as we become more competitive as companies, right? There's always look for ways to improve processes, to get more efficient. You know, those Six Sigma folks, I love them to death. Man, they try to make things as efficient as possible, right? It's part of their job. It's why they have that. Sometimes they may cut. We talk about waste, the buddy system. Hey, we can do this with one person instead of two. Maybe there's a safety reason behind that, right? So again, looking at those reasons why, we have increased risk because of injury due to lack of immediate response. Another caveat to lone worker is someone may work in a buddy system, right? But how far are they away from emergency services? That's another avenue that we need to consider when we talk about what we're looking at from hazard control. And of course, the lone worker segment is increasing in every business, whether you're in retail, you're in industry, you're in commercial stuff, hospitality, healthcare is another big one for us when it comes to violence in the workplace. Think about people going to people's homes, doing hours work, et cetera, therapies. Those are the areas that we need to consider as well. So a little bit we're going to go over. There's no legislation in the U.S. when it comes to a generalized for lone worker. There are pieces for tasks, 1910-269 for power generation, right? We also have confined space, and there's some firefighter measures there that we, again, there's very task specific, but there's no overarching for lone worker. Now, where my company is based in Canada, there's a very specific, stringent legislative body or regulation on lone worker, which is one of the reasons why I'm like on Canada, right? So we're going to just touch on the online article of Protect Lone Workers with a Safety Management System. We're going to go through a highlight of Dr. Fred Schwab's 10 tips, which are found in the article that we put out there. And then it's something like, yeah, I'm sold. I understand lone worker. Let's put it in. We're going to recap those 10 tips and how we can really make it practical into your company. We're going to talk about some of the challenges in solving with connected devices, which is where Blackline kind of comes into play from that PPE side. We'll talk about some of the hierarchy of controls. We'll also talk about some of the PPE ways to do that. And I know I'm a sales guy, but I'll take that to about that 10%, 5% level of this. This is going to be mostly educational when it comes to lone worker. And then elevate with the analytics, technology solutions, and ask any questions. So any questions before we get started? So again, these are just some of the regulations that we see that are out there. There was a memo put out in 1999, interpretation letter that talked about that there is no general standard that deals with the situation of employees working alone. So we'll make sure to bring that up to attention. If you're looking for those laws and understanding those laws, there is that letter out there to help us say, okay, we have nothing to meet. Now let's put in best practices. The shipyard in 1915 does have a very loose lone worker. When it talks about people or employees working alone, such as a confined space or isolated location, they have to have a means of regular intervals for the job assignment, and then they have to let them know at the end of the job assignment where they're at. So, and this is from what I have seen in and around the Gulf, it is a very loose regulation. It's not something that is hammered. There's no, emphasis program on it whatsoever. But it is something that we can always reference to when it comes to building a lone worker program for shipyard industry. And then last but not least, this is from Cal OSHA. It talks about heat illness prevention. I know that heat stress is coming down the pipe. We keep hearing about it, but this is something that Cal OSHA has already put in there. It talks about an electronic device furnish reliable communication. Employee must ensure a means of summoning emergency medical services in that situation. So again, just another means of understanding the law that we'll talk about and Dr. Fred's 10 tips here. So I'll post this in the chat here at the end of this. This is the link, what the page looks like for ASSP. Kind of dives into, again, what this article looks like. It defines those that integrate risk reducing controls into your safety management systems and programs. So with this document, again, Dr. Fred identifies it as a WASP. You know, everybody in EHS really loves acronyms, right? And I see this as a great opportunity to take this and run with it. A cool logo, kind of an emphasis program in your facility using the WASP, just kind of how my mind works. But really drives into some of the controls, the identifications. There's a couple of cool tables in there talking about serious injury tables, as well as some ideas that you may not think of. So let's understand the 10 tips, right? The first one we want to do is define lone worker for your organization. To me, this is the absolute most important step because you're setting yourself as a precedent of how we're going to define lone worker. Is it always going to be someone who works alone? Or is it going to be someone who works alone for more than 2 hours? Or someone who works alone in this part of our facility, right? So this is where the kind of the meat starts. And then out from there, we identify the hazards, of course, after we understand the law. So if you're going to go through a lone worker and you're understanding lone worker, make sure you take the time. Maybe you do a perception survey, right? In this article, there's a great perception survey lined out, but it gives you some tools to really understand how you want to start this process. Understanding the law, of course, we just talked about it. This is going to fall under general duty, obviously, unless you have those task specifics that meet the criteria. I think the most work of this to me is identifying the hazards, right? How do we identify lone working hazards? To me, it's, you know, maybe new, right? So there's a lot of brainstorming, a lot of good meetings, maybe a steering committee to come out of this to really understand in my facility what that's really going to look like. After we identify, then we're going to assess the risks. And regardless of course, your legal requirements, we need to make sure that we assess and address the hazards that you've identified. So what are some good ways to do that? So does anyone in here have a lone worker program in their facility? I'm the only one. So somebody give me an example. What industry are you working from? Anybody want to volunteer?
I work for Ring Manufacturing in Montgomery, Alabama, and this has been on my radar. Before I moved here, when I was back in Texas, I was developing a program. I moved here. It's on my radar now to develop one.
Okay.
We have plenty of maintenance employees. I have a wastewater treatment operator that works for me directly. They're many times basically on their own and alone. There may be people at the plant, but they're not in the vicinity of those workers.
It's a great example. Absolutely great example. I'll give you another example that ties kind of into that. I was at a facility a couple of weeks ago, and they were really good. They wanted one device for a warehouse worker. He worked third shift, he worked alone. They thought it was a great application. So we went in, we kind of did a little dog and pony, understand what lone worker is, just to make sure that we meet their criteria for success. We came out of that meeting hitting maintenance. We came out of the meeting hitting forklift drivers because they went into certain parts of the facility. There was nobody around, right? They're working by themselves. So after you start identifying, start brainstorming, hey, yeah, this makes sense here. Well, it might not make sense here, but we'll table that for now. Let's get started and kind of roll into this as we go. So, you know, identifying lone worker, identifying the needs, and then it becomes to how are you going to control it, right? What hierarchy of controls are you going to put in place? And there are several. I'm not here to say, hey, use black line on every single one. Makes the most sense. No, I'm not here to say that. What I'm here to say is control it, use the hierarchies, whether it's to avoidance, elimination, substitution. We already know what all those are, right? Find ways to do that. And in this document, it gives you some really good information on how to do that across the wide array of industry. Prohibit certain tasks. That is a great way from an avoidance standpoint, right? Skanska, the big construction company, has a lone worker policy for working on mobile elevated work platforms. It is about 8 pages long, and it is very detailed on what you can and what you cannot do when it comes to working on this. I thought that was a very good article to highlight because in construction, you really don't see a lot of lone worker. But in that situation, they saw the need and they put a policy in place for it. Supervising loan workers. All right, the level of supervision that's required, again, goes entirely to the risk at hand. Identifying your risk, understanding what that job entails. Maybe say, hey, you know what? Even though they may work alone, it's a very low risk job. We're going to take that out of the equation. But if it's a medium or high risk job, absolutely, we need to go ahead and apply some type of loan worker definition to that. Then monitoring, right? Monitoring or tracking is different from supervising. We'll say that again. Monitoring or tracking is a lot different than supervising, right? If something goes wrong, we need to figure out where they're at. Versus, yep, I want to tell them at 8 o'clock what to do, and I'll talk to them at 11 o'clock or 11:30, right? The other part of this is conducting program audits. Anybody ever heard, you're only as good as your audit, right? It's kind of a staple in the AHS world. So if you go out there and you push this out, what is it really going to entail? How much buy-in do you have? What's it going to look like on the backside, right? PDCA all day. So it's very, very important that if you're going to start a loan worker program, that you implement it in the ways that make sense for you and your company, but also make sure that it's a way to audit it and audit it effectively. And last on the 10 tips is focus on improvement. How do we improve this? That's why I say, hey, start with your top 5 risks, high risk, and then grow into the role, grow into the program itself. You'll see as things start coming up that, hey, this makes sense. This area I think should need it based off of this risk here, this mid-level risk, and kind of grow into what that program should look like. All right. So sold on loan worker. What's that nitty-gritty step look like? Well, we talked about, got to define, right? What is loan worker within my company? Okay, that's, to me, that is that starting step. A perception survey. I know there's always mixed feelings about perception surveys, but it's a good start if you have a good safety culture, obviously. Understand any legislation. And if you develop a written policy or program, we can help you with that. We've built a template to show what we think would look like based off of ASSP best practices from the industries, where you can just plug and play and add your information as you go. Of course, this will improve your buy-in and our risk assessments. To me, this belongs in JHAs or JSAs. It has to be task specific. You can't open the door and say, we're all a loan worker, because everybody's going to be like, well, I'm a loan worker. I go to lunch alone, right? It has to be task specific, and it lives to me. And it's not mentioned as much in this document. I think Fred does that on purpose just to kind of leave it open door. But to me, if you start with a JHA, you build your definition, apply the definition to your JHA, JSAs, and then from there drive out your controls to mitigate the risk. Does that make sense? The tools that are identified in the document sent out, whether it's the SIF table, it also gives some good examples of where you may find loan work, and then the hierarchy of controls. There's some really good hierarchy of controls in there. Again, we have this documents to help out. If you're interested in doing a loan worker program, not even saying buying any product from me, we'll come out and help support that, what that looks like. Okay. The biggest thing too is make sure we train and educate on workers on the front side, and then, in my opinion, annually. Okay, what is loan worker? Make sure you educate it. Everybody's on the same unified path of what that looks like. To me, add a demonstration of understanding. When I started thinking about this in my EHS mind, if I was at a plant, I was building this facility, building this program, how would I get the best demonstration of understanding? And I thought, why don't I just do a JHA of something way off the wall topic, just to get people to thinking. You think about filming a stream out in the middle of the woods. What are, is that loan worker, right? I'm going to go through my typical JHA, understand my steps, everything from wildlife hazards to slip, trip, falls, all that fun stuff, right? But is that loan worker? Yes.
We have a team out there doing something very similar to that now.
Are they? Was it one person or two people?
Person on this assignment, but again, we have our controls, our communications, but we don't have is the technology I'm looking for here today.
Okay. So the other thing on this is, say, what if I added 2 people to that? Would that still be considered loan work?
Because of the location and the wilderness, the distance to help fire departments are at least 20 minutes away. should something go wrong with either one of them.
So how would we mitigate that? To me, and I'm being devil's advocate right here. I'm taking this off my shirt, right? If I don't have a device, what are some other options to do that? To mitigate that risk? Got to go to the wilderness. You got to take pictures. What are some ways to mitigate that?
One of the things we've done with our folks is we notify the local EMS fire department that we're going to be in this area. Also, stream part of the notify the National Forestry. And then we have those there and they become part of the process.
Awesome.
Supervisor check-in and evaluation.
Yeah.
Cell phone usage.
Every 2 hours, you need to call me. Every 30 minutes, you need to call me, just to make sure that you're okay.
I think there would be some basics in training and equipment too. I mean, you walk through the woods, it's different type of PPE, but you need to have the right shoes, the right,
Yep.
food, everything that you need.
Absolutely. What time of day? Is it raining? Environmental control, right?
First aid kit.
Yeah. So there's all different ways you think about it. So if you take this demonstration of understanding, kind of have that mentality, then you start applying it to your facilities. You'll start getting a lot of more buy-in from your team lead supervisors, even people on the floor. So. Any questions? That's kind of the piece that I have for loan work, what that needs to look like. I know we went through it really, really quick. We can dive into it individually because it takes up so much time in doing so, but any other feedback, comments to loan worker and what that looks like across the floor? Anybody online? Okay. So let's talk about through our controls, whether it's avoidance substitution, we get down to the admin and PPE. Let's say, hey, look, we need to identify a piece of PPE to help us out. Ding, ding, ding. That's where I come into play, right? So we have what we call Internet of Things devices, IoT devices. And what that is a device. Remember I said we played in gas detection and lone worker. So gas detection, that's a lone worker head. Just pops on right there. So what does this do for us? Let's just talk about the lone worker piece. Our devices are default connected to cellular satellite technology, which means as soon as you turn the device on, you automatically get uploaded and get monitored, tracked, however you want to say, right? We know exactly where you're at based off GPS and cellular data. What does that do for us? Well, again, it satisfies part of the, it's not the all of lone worker, but it satisfies that piece of check-in. Satisfies the piece of no motion. Satisfies in case of emergency because our device has a latch, or SOS latch, similar to the life alert. You guys remember the life alert bracelet? Kind of like this, right? I pull that, I get a notification, depending on what plan that you have. I can either text or email a person involved, or I can actually call the device and check and see if you're okay. Okay. And if you're not okay, because I got GPS location, I know exactly where you are, we can go find you.
Do you have like the firefighter mode on there, so if a person has fallen down or is not moving for a period of time, it automatically sends the alert out?
So what we do is we call the device first. So it will send the alert, potential fall detection, right? So it's a accelerometer and it's there's a slide gradient on it so that you can do it very light or very heavy, depending on your industry. So that if you fall, it will alert first, and we can set how long that alert needs to ping. So if it's 0 to 60 seconds, it's kind of our, so you set 30 seconds, it'll sit there alarm for 30 seconds. If you don't get anything from there, it's going to alert Blackline, which either we send you a text, email, or we call the device, or both, and say, hey, are you okay? If we don't get any answer, based on how we set up the protocol, we'll call 911 and say, hey, you've got a man down right here in the woods filming for bears. Okay, same thing with the no motion. Even though there may not have been a fall, we have a no motion timer, anywhere from, again, 0 to 30 minutes. Set that up. Same thing with check-in. If you want to do a check-in, every 2 hours, you have the device on. It alerts them check-in. They just hit a button. Boom, they're good. So it satisfies those pieces of your lone worker program. The other thing that we do is that we do the same thing we just talked about, except for we add gas detection on top of it. So if you have gas hazards in your industry, same thing with a high CO, PID levels, I can see that information. If we get above the, anything from TWA, STEL, high-low alerts, we can get the information to your cell phone, email you, or if it is a danger alert, then we will call the device to make sure they're okay. We have a lot of features inside of what we just talked about. Everything from helping healthcare, here from healthcare. We also have a silent SOS. If somebody's in a situation with workplace violence, they can pull the device. We listen when we call to see if we hear an aggravated situation. If we hear an aggravated situation, we don't even talk to the person. We call them direct. We go direct to 911, or we call the supervisor or whoever that notified contact is to get them involved. Device, the device features, 18 hours of use, our pump units, we go 1 to 5 gases. So if anyone wants to talk about, I won't take up too much time on you guys on this piece of it, because I told Paula this is not a sales pitch. We can go one-on-one and talk a lot about what these things will do and what they won't do. But we are heavily present in oil and gas. We kind of own the oil and gas market, or we're getting to owning the oil and gas market. We play well with fire departments. They love us because of, again, just default turn on with gas detection. But the lone worker piece to me is an underserved market for our facilities for sure. So just a graphic how it works. We connected online software. Our software has analytics. So if you require someone to wear one of these part of their PPE, we can do any type of analytics outside of that. So you look at near misses, right? Potential fall detections. To say they trip and it sets this thing off and they silence it. Oh yeah, I just tripped. Well, it's still an alert that we can go back and pull and pick up. So if you look at 6 months, 8 months worth of data, we can show you based on GPS location where those near misses are happening. Same thing with gas readings. If we get over 1 part per million, we pick up as a data point. So if you want to see where some of your lower gas readings are, we can do that as well.
Randall, you got live monitoring there. How is that? I mean, you probably have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands.
312,000 devices out in the field.
So, I mean, that's a busy person. I mean,
It's a busy department. Absolutely.
so they're looking for alerts, right?
Yes. We have a dedicated department. We call it Safety Operations Center in our facility in Calgary. It's manned 24/7. I think we're over like 40 or 50 people now. Just that's all they're doing is monitoring. So everything from when I do trainings to pick up, you can see what that looks like, to real life situations. In the last 12 months, we've had 6 confirmed saves. Everything from a fall to snowmobile accident. There was a couple of gas readings that happened where we actually alerted 911 emergency services and they went out. And you know, again, lone worker is to go from recovery to rescue, right? Recovery to rescue. That's kind of that tagline that keeps coming to my mind. We want to make sure when something happens, that we can do immediately instead of waiting to find someone, you know, 2 hours, 4 hours later, or the next day. Great question.
On your gas detection, have you seen where any of the clients have used it to replace a PID or FID?
So we don't do FID, PID, no. We have had some skews from humidity and certain applications. Paper mill is probably one of the biggest ones because they're monitoring for toluene in some areas. We'll see a skew, but when that happens, it's a good time for them to say, hey, what's going on? How are you using the monitor? How did it not happen yesterday? Why is it happening today? So it gives the HS team a good way to go and investigate what that looks like. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known, right? These traditional gas monitor would have. So again, take location technology, software tools, data. Our software lives on a browser. We do not, it's not something you have to download, you have to pay a licensee for. It's literally, you pull it up. I don't care if you put one person on it or 500 people log in. It's totally how you guys want to manage your systems and what that looks like. But you can pull it up from your phone, tablet, computer, doesn't matter what. So automating, think about the manual employee checks. For confined space, we have the ability to text message with the device and run reports off of that. So I have a couple of customers that said, hey, you know what? I love the way we're doing with paper, but I'm trying to get away from paper. They'll use the text message feature of the product and they'll assign a predetermined word that says check in, check out, or check periodic. And they can just go in while they're doing this, they'll go in and send a message because it snapshots what the gas detection readings are saying, the GPS location, and the time and date stamp. So they go at the end of that, pull the report, they're done. And it happens for a couple of customers that do confined spaces all day long.
They don't have any problem for when they actually go down into space, it's still communicating.
We have, I'll give you an example. We have this one because we have an MSA with Tyson. So Tyson grain elevators, one of the most challenging ones we've had because we get under thousands and thousands of barrels of corn in these grains. So what we do, I can pull this out, is we have a satellite product. The cellular will not work. Once you get about 50 feet inside the tunnel, forget about it. Because a satellite unit uses a bridge that uses mesh, we can get inside that and bounce all around. So they don't lose that piece. So another one is the challenge with evacuation management, right? How do you get in touch with those lone workers if you have a situation when they're not answering their phone? Well, you can send a message directly to the device and make it an alert to say, hey, yeah, you need to get out of here, right? Tornado warning. We're working, again, we are a technology company that does lone worker gas detection. We're working towards things like, hey, let's integrate NOAA. So when a tornado warning hits an area, automatically hit your device. That way there's no manual intervention in that when it comes to that kind of thing. Then I won't get too much into the analytics, but again, just know we live in a world where there are no boxes. When people say think outside the box, we live in blue. We can pretty much make it happen. It's just a matter of getting your thought out of your head and putting it on paper. That's our biggest challenge. Give you a couple of incidents. You guys ever heard of NiSource? A big gas company up in the Ohio, Indiana, Illinois area, Pennsylvania. So they came to us and said, hey, great, love your service, but here's what I need. If I'm going to pay for this and really invest with this and put out 3,200 devices, I need some help eliminating some other stuff. So what do you need help eliminating? Well, what about dispatch? I need to go to this address. How do I know who's the closest person there? Well, we can build that for you. We already do Google Maps. So build a program for them to show what that looked like. This is some of that thinking out of the box kind of thing. Questions? Concerns? Smart rocks? Good kind of jokes. Take it all.
Well, I'll comment. I told you that this was on my radar when I was back in Texas. I worked for a commercial heat and air company. We had over 70 vehicles out on the road, dispatched all over Dallas, Fort Worth. And I trialed your product. It worked tremendously well. I left before we got it fully implemented, and I don't know what they did with it after I left. But my goal was to put one of these on every single driver out there because they were by themselves. They were in basements, they were on roofs. We had no idea where they were at.
When you think about non-routine tasks, how are you going to address that? Again, not saying that we're the answer for everything, but in those situations, I consider that a non-routine task. You don't know what they're going to do that day, right? So you build out a check sheet, make sure they understand what they need to look at. Are they wearing a lone worker device? Yes. Okay, well, I know that's gonna help out with my check-ins, my no motions, and my fall detections. I'm eliminating or reducing those risks by myself using the device. It's just a way to, again, go back and talk about exactly what you're saying. Those situations, it's a need, but it's not a need for every situation itself, right? We have tons of white papers, case studies. Again, get in touch with me. I'll send you what you want to look at, whatnot, and we'll definitely help you out. All right, hopefully I didn't go over. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your time, guys. I need to do anything to shut down and then just turn everybody off on first.
You can send it back to me, right click on me, see me in chat.
We'll go ahead and continue our meeting, and we're actually going to cover a few meeting items while we have lunch. I honestly believe that we are going to disconnect from Zoom. Is that correct?
Yes.
And thank you guys for attending, for those who did. And we will see you again next month. And please try to attend in person if you're able. I keep looking back there thinking, I don't know, this camera, that camera, I don't know what I'm. At any rate, thank you guys. Help yourselves to lunch for those of us who are here. And then once we get seated back and kind of a networking lunch, we'll come.